Welcome everyone. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Glad to see some viewers here. We're going to be working through the very beginnings of the Rust book for Rust programming. I'm going to go silent for just a little bit, and I'll be back. All right, we are live. Let's get started. How's everyone doing? We've got a couple viewers here. Great. Um, cool. All right. So, just so you know, Untitled Bear. Good to see you. All right. Good evening to you, GM. Um, just so you know, we are working through the beginnings of the Rust book. My goal is to walk through the Rust book over time so that people that are new or brand new to programming can pick up Rust and get running. So this is the very beginning. This stream video, whether you're watching it on Twitch or YouTube, is brought to you by the GROM's Club NFT project. So if you're interested in Solana NFTs, you're interested in Solana, come check us out. I've got links in the chat. The first link, you can go into GROM. All you need is a Solana wallet, half a Solana. There's a Discord link. You can come join the link. You don't have to have a GROM to come to Discord. And then I got a link to the book that we're going to be working through and a link to the Rust Playground in case you haven't set up or installed Rust on your computer. Eventually you'll want to do that, but for this session, you don't need to do that because we're gonna be doing a lot of talking and not so much coding, but that'll change as we get into further sessions. But I want everyone to get real comfortable with the concepts we're working with. That way, as we get along to the more difficult, complex stuff, it starts to become more straightforward. Welcome, Sylvester Vivo. Good to see you here. Thank you for coming. GMDE to you. All right. So let me switch my window here. Just a moment. We're gonna be looking at the Master Dogan. Welcome. It's up to you. Welcome. Good to see you here. All right. I'm going to switch up my screen here. Give me just a moment. We're going to look at a different window as we... Let me know if we have any problems reading the text on screen. I'm going to talk about it so you don't necessarily have to read it word for word. Music is a bit too high compared to your voice. All right, got it. Thanks for the feedback. I will bring that music down. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your help, Untitled Bear. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about why Rust, what is Rust, why we want to bother to learn Rust, right? So I think the majority of the GROM community, like, we want to learn Rust because we want to become Solana developers, right? So why is it that if you want to become a Solana developer, well, I guess there's a few questions there, right? Why is Rust the programming language that's usually used for Solana programming? And I'm also going to talk over like why, even if you're not interested in Solana or blockchain development, why you would want to learn Rust. So Rust started as a language that's kind of an alternative to low-level systems programming languages. Uh, and that would be, C++ is kind of in that arena, but really more C. It's a much more performant language. C++ and C, they have their downsides. I remember when I was a kid and I wanted to be a game developer, I started to learn C++, and I was really kind of overwhelmed with all the syntax. I didn't know what to make sense of it. C++, there's a lot. From my experience now learning C++ when I was older, is that there's a lot, like with C++, there's a lot of ways to do the same thing different ways. And it just gets complex. And then there's C, which is like a more performant language. It doesn't have as many features as C++. But with that, there's not as many like safeguards for memory safety that you have with a new language like Rust. So Rust is growing in its use. It is it's clearly like all over blockchain development, whether you want to write smart contracts or software that runs on a blockchain, or whether you want to actually write a blockchain software like for validators or things like that. Rust is only growing in popularity for those type of projects. A lot of the new Ethereum tooling that's coming out is written in Rust. Now, you still, for the most part, write Solidity if you're going to write a smart contract on Ethereum, but much of the software that goes into making the Ethereum network run is more and more of it is written in Rust. Now, outside of blockchain, Rust is becoming also more popular as like different applications are looking to get more performance out of the computers they run on. There are AWS, Amazon is maintaining some frameworks like Hyper and Warp that are really fast web servers. And those web servers typically faster than what we would need for like kind of a simple small scale application. But when you think about the scale at which AWS and Amazon runs, like they need all the performance they can get. And there are also other consumers of web servers that need really fast web servers. Now, if you're just going to have like a blog, having a super fast web server is not the most important thing. Another place that Rust is gaining a lot of traction is in graphics processing and programming. So if you're writing either firmware or software for like, let's say a graphics processing, a GPU, a graphics processing unit, like that is more and more being written in Rust. Give me just a moment here. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. So yeah, beyond that, there's some cool game engines coming out that utilize Rust. There's a game engine called Bevy. I think it's more like a framework that's seems to be getting some traction. I don't know what state of it is that it's currently in, but Godot, which is like an open source game engine, you can now script in Rust. Now that might not be like production ready, but I know there's a project out there to make that happen. So the opportunities to write Rust are only growing. It's the most popular language among developers year after year. There's more and more jobs available. But to me, what's exciting about it, and I think probably some of you here, is that you can write Solana smart contracts in it. Now, so the other thing to be aware of is we want to make a distinction between like Solana development, which is like writing a smart contract that runs on the Solana blockchain, and then there's like writing the software that Solana is made out of. So it's interesting to note that Rust is not only used to write smart contracts that run on Solana, but it's also used to actually write the Solana validator software that makes up the network. The founders of Solana chose that language pretty early on, and and made that both a core language they use every day, but also a language that Solana developers can use. So if you want to get like any of these like low level systems, um, like software areas, are really good opportunities to use Rust. But we're going to try to take a agnostic approach for the most part. I may call out points of where, hey, like be aware of this in the future as we get to Solana development. But for the most part, I want anybody to be able to use this series of streams and videos, which will be saved on YouTube, um, so that they can learn Rust, even if they want to become any kind of Rust developer. Um, so we're going to kind of step through the book here together. Um, we'll probably get through. We're going to talk through these 2 points, I believe, today. We're going to go for an hour, and then we're just going to get as far as we can get, and then I'm going to pick up tomorrow, and we're just going to go like this is going to be an ongoing thing. But again, the videos will be available on YouTube very soon. I'm safe, and this is being recorded, but I still got to figure out how to get that on YouTube and make sure that all works well. So maybe a few days, but this is going to be a growing library of Rust streams. So we're going to go till the top of the hour, and we're going to get as far as we can. I want to encourage you to ask questions as they come up. I may not always know the answer. Hopefully other people can help. Or if I feel that it's like relevant to what we're discussing, we'll try to find out together. So we are actually going to skip this section, the installation of Rust, but I recommend that when you have time, you go through this. I know if you're a new developer, you may not be used to some of this information here, but that's okay. What I would recommend that you do is you set some time aside when you have a chance, work through this on your computer, because it's different, right? If you're on Windows versus Mac OS and Linux. And if you have questions or if you hit rough spots, come into the GROM's Discord, which I have a link in the chat, and ask questions. And myself and other members of the community will do their best to help you get moving. Now, I'm going to make a recommendation here that you don't have to take. But in general, when you develop, for the most part, and I don't want to like cause any any like operating system wars here, and there are exceptions, right? Like, but in general, when you develop, certainly for Solana and maybe other platforms, you're going to want to do that on either a Mac OS instance or an instance of Linux. Now that's not going to be required. We're going to do our best to work with Windows installations as well. But if you want to go that extra step, because you can always do this later, right? If you want to go the extra step, I would recommend going through and setting up what's referred to as WSL, or Windows Subsystem for Linux. And what that does is it installs Linux onto your Windows machine, almost as like a separate computer that you can use as your development environment. That's not required. It does take a little more work, but I think in the long run, it's worth it. I have a link in the GROM's Discord on how to do that. Sorry, I don't have that right now. But if you join the GROM's Discord, there's a channel called Beginner Geek Curriculum that has that information, and that's available to everyone. So yeah, you're going to want to go through this process and install Rust on your system. If you don't have it installed today, that's perfectly okay. We're gonna leverage what's called the Rust Playground, and that's another link I have in the chat. This is the last link I have in my message, and I'll show that to you here in a moment. So this just goes through some other commands to kind of maintain your version of Rust. once you get a little more familiar with the command line, if this doesn't make sense now, it will make more sense later. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk through these commands. Okay, I'm not going to do them for you right now, just because it's just going to be simpler to kind of talk through these, especially if you're not used to the command line. This will probably be better if I can just walk you through them. And so what this does, this process is walking you through a manual creation of a Rust program. Now, very soon, in the next session or two, you're no longer going to go through this process. But this is a good example of how this is going to work, so you can kind of understand how it works behind the scenes when you use something called cargo. But for the time being, we're going to pretend like you have an empty Rust installation. You're not using cargo, and we're going to create the files manually. So I'll step through these commands, and I'm just going to step through these ones right here for Linux and Mac OS. But as you can see, there's similar commands for Windows. And so this make dir is this mkdir is just making a directory called projects in your current. It's just under your user directory. That's what this little tilde means. So like if I'm on my computer that has my user directory of Adam Del Sol, it'll say Adam Del Sol /projects. But a shortcut to that in the Linux style command line is to use this tilde here to reference my user home folder. So we're going to make that projects directory in my user home folder. Then we're going to change into that projects directory. This stands for CD, change directory. And then we're going to make another directory called Hello World. And then we're going to change into that directory called Hello World. So if you have a terminal at your computer and you're watching along and you have it open and you have Rust installed, you can go ahead and do that. And all that's doing is creating a projects directory, moving to that projects directory, making a subdirectory called Hello World, and then moving into that Hello World subdirectory. And these commands do the same thing. I'm not terribly familiar with these commands, but I can tell you just by looking at them, they mean the same thing, right? Make directory, change directory, make directory, change directory. Now, we're going to get into the fun part, right? We're going to write our first Rust program. So in your terminal, you're going to create a file called main.rs. It needs to be named exactly this, main.rs. That main.rs is what Rust requires in order to build an executable application. So actually, just let me correct that. You don't always need a main.rs, but that will be kind of the standard as we go forward. So you can create a file called helloworld.rs for the purposes of what we're doing. But just to keep it simple and stick to convention, I recommend creating a file called main.rs. So I know in Linux or Mac OS, you can use the command touch, touch, space, the file name once you're in that directory, that Hello World directory. But if you're on Windows, it's I feel like I've seen that command and it's a little bit longer, and I don't remember offhand. So for the time being, if you need to know how to create a file, you can always do that. And you're on Windows, you can always create that in your Windows GUI if that's the easiest way to do. You can, right click and new file in Windows and create main.rs. Yeah. So now that we have this main.rs file, we're going to create a program, a Rust program. We have this here. This is a cool little feature of this website that hosts the Rust book that you can run this program. And we get our output here. And I'm going to break all this down in the playground just so we can kind of talk through it. Actually, yeah, I'll do that in the Rust playground. You know, if you're lazy and you don't want to write this code out and you want to copy it into either your text editor or the Rust playground that we have a link for, you can click this button and it's going to copy it to your clipboard, and you can, you know, right click and paste. But I think we can handle this. And here it's saved. Let me switch over to that Rust playground. Give me just a moment here. So this is a blank Rust playground. I'll drop the link just to have that again. When you open this, I think if I remember correctly, you're going to see this same program, right? This fn main print line hello world. So let's go ahead and just clear that out. If you're following along, clear that out, and let's write this very simple program together. This is going to be, because I think it's cool to write your first Rust program together. And so we're going to start out with, and I'll tell you these things as we write them out. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type it, talk through it as I type. But we'll go through what all these things mean in a moment. So fn is just the indicator for function. Let me make this a little bit bigger. See how that looks. Yeah, let me know what you guys think on the text size, if that needs to be bigger or smaller, whatever you think. So we're going to type in fn for function, and then we're going to name this function main. We're going to have an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. You notice this code editor actually inserts the closed parentheses for us, just a little helper. And then we're going to open a curly, what we call a curly braces or curly brackets, to indicate the beginning of our function. So a function should, like, for the time being, you can think of it as a block of code. It's got a series of code that, you know, we can refer to. All right, and then I'm going to hit enter, and this code editor just inserted this bracket, this closing bracket for us. And then we're going to type in print ln exclamation point. Now that the letters there are short for print line. Okay, well, the exclamation point, we're probably not going to get too deep on what that is today. Just know that it's called a macro. And if you want to get ahead of the curve, you can search for Rust macros either in the book or on Google and learn more about macros. But if you're familiar with macros in things like Excel or stuff like that, you may know that it's kind of like a shortcut, right? So in Rust, in this case, a macro is like a shortcut of code. And so when we put this in, later on, the computer comes in and inserts more code. So we're going to open the parentheses, and this closed parentheses, we get this from the text editor creates it for us. If whatever you're using doesn't have that, just type your own, all right? And then we're going to open some quotation marks. We have a similar action with the quotation marks. It creates a closing one for us. Give me just a moment here. All right, I'm back. So yeah, so then we're just going to type whatever you can type whatever you want here. The the standard is Hello World as your first programming language, or first program, excuse me. It's Hello World. One thing we need to add here to indicate the end of this line is a semicolon. But you can put whatever you want. I can put Untied Bear. He's here with us. So I can say hello, Untied Bear. But for now, I'm just gonna do Hello World because this is like the classic. We have to do Hello World. It's just kind of a rule. It's a unspoken rule that your first program is Hello World. And I remember this going back for years and years ago. All right, so using our Rust playground here, when we get down to real development, we're not always going to have this run button, but since it's here for us, making things simple, we're going to go ahead and use it. And so this print line macro that we used, I know the word macro, if you don't know what it means, it's okay. We'll talk about it at some point. It's not important. You can just think of it as, a shortcut to write something out to our terminal here, to our standard output. Here it's referred to as a standard output. If you're using like a terminal of some kind or command line, it's outputting that to there. So it's not going to like pop up in a window or anything like that. It's not going to like be a big, letters across your screen. It's just going to put it wherever your standard output is, which usually is going to be your terminal. And probably here in a moment we'll open Visual Studio Code and we'll see kind of another terminal or another output rather. So let's talk about this again. What we're looking at here. So FN is just a keyword. Actually, I'm gonna take a break here and talk about something. So with programming, one thing that you should keep in mind is that programming is just text files. And when you're programming, all you're doing is creating text files. So how does like a text file go from these letters and numbers that we've written on the screen into making the computer do something, right? Well, that can happen in different ways. But in Rust, we're going to talk about the way Rust works, okay? So part of Rust is, when you talk about Rust, it's not just a syntax of language that determines like, hey, I need to put F in here, I need some brackets here, and I need to put these quotations here. That's a syntax, right? That's a syntax of Rust. But another important part of Rust is the Rust compiler. And what the Rust compiler does is it comes and looks at your file here that you created, this text file that you, the programmer, have created. And from that, it looks at the text you put in and turns this text into a language that is efficient and easy for the computer to understand, right? Because the computer doesn't read things the same way we do. So the compiler, it does that, but it also does more, which we'll kind of explore as we learn Rust. But this is a big part of the compiler. It compiles your code into machine readable code, stuff that if we looked at it as humans, we probably couldn't read it. But it's efficient instructions for the computer to read. So as we talk about the Rust syntax and things like keywords and variable names, like these things are all important and need to be correct and specific for the Rust compiler to work so that it can translate your instructions into something that the computer can read. So FN is a keyword. And when the compiler, I don't know specifically what order the compiler reads this like line for line, but you can think in an abstract way that the compiler is reading your code line for line. And when it comes across this FN, outside of this bracket, if it's just reading this line and it sees this FN by itself here, it says that tells the Rust compiler that this is a function. Now, so the Rust compiler knows that what comes after this should be, some information, right? Now, for our purposes here, it sees this main and these parentheses, and it knows that that is the name of the function, is main. Now, these parentheses can hold things. Ours doesn't have anything in the parentheses, but we're not going to talk about that right now, okay? I just want to keep moving with the very basic syntax we have. Now, like as we said earlier, the brackets are determine the beginning and ending of this function. And what is this function called? It's called main. And it may be even more specific or more accurate to say this is main, with just empty parentheses. So we have these brackets. The compiler, let's just follow along with the compiler again, right? It's reading, it says fn, okay, this is a function. It's called main. There's nothing in these parentheses. And there's nothing here. Later on, we'll see functions that have something here. But there is an opening bracket. Or curly bracket, excuse me. And then we see something here called print line. And again, we're seeing this as the Rust compiler, remember. We see this print ln exclamation point. I'll talk about what a macro is here, just as kind of like a flavor, a taste of what is to come, because macros are a bit of a deeper topic. But remember how we said up here, the compiler sees this fn function, or this fn, and knows that means function, right? And then there's a name. Well, when the compiler sees this, print line exclamation point, the compiler says, hey, I know that, just like I know that fn means function. The compiler says print line exclamation points means I need to go grab all this other code somewhere else and put it in here. And we can actually, I hope we're not getting too, I think we can, maybe not. Sorry, this is probably a bit of a diversion. I'm gonna see if it's worth it. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is interesting. All right, so I just went up. Now this is something you probably won't do very early on, but I just want to kind of illuminate. I think this is helping us understand what the compiler does, right? So I went up to tools. You probably won't do this, okay? Anytime soon. Maybe at some point in your journey you will. And I click this expand macros. And so I just want you to look down here where it says, let me bring this up a little bit so it's easier to read. When I clicked expand macros, it went in and it read this macro here and then inserted all the information that is assigned to this print line macro. So what this is doing is seeing our macro and says, oh, this is print line. We need all the code necessary to print this line of text out to the standard output. And it's a lot of code, and this is a pain, right? Like I don't want to say that I'm a crazy experienced developer. I'm not. But I think if you went and talked to a senior developer and they saw this, they would not want to write this. And they wouldn't want to read it either. Because you have all these, like we'll talk about kind of what these colons mean and all that stuff. But just looking at it, like it's like std, io, print, core, funct, arguments, new, like we can kind of like understand what some of these words mean. But what does it mean with all these brackets and braces and parentheses? I don't know. Like, I don't want to mess with that. So part of Rust, the language, and all the goodies, if you will, that come with it, are these macros. And so it makes writing this very simple program, it makes it simple than writing all that other stuff we saw. So that's a taste of macros. We're going to go deeper. There's a section in the book that talks exclusively about macros. and they come in different formats. But for the time being, all you need to know is that this print line exclamation point will write whatever we put in this parentheses out to the standard output. So this print line takes this text here, or a string, a text string, or a string slice. It will take this. Sorry, I don't remember if it's a string or string slice. But either way, it will take this and it will output it to the command line. And then we close this parentheses so we know the bounds of whatever is going into the print line macro. And then we have a semicolon ending this specific line. Now, what if we wanted to write another line? Sure, we can do that. We can write the same line. We can write a completely different line. This is a recommendation. It's not a recommendation. Go to GROM at so we have 4 print lines here. Let's do that macro expansion just to see what we're missing out on by using macros, right? And see if we want to use that instead. All right, it's taking some time. Oh, I didn't like it. I don't know. See, did I mess something up here? No, everything looks okay. I don't know why I didn't want to do that. We're not going to worry about it if it does, because if it doesn't want to work. I don't know the boundaries of this macro expansion. There we go. Yeah, see, look at this. We've got all this code that Rust is handling for us. It's bringing in all this other stuff. We'll talk about what that means. And it's doing all that for us. So, yeah, let's use the macro, right? That's easier. It's not only easier to write, but probably more importantly, it's easier to read. You're like, as you become a developer and you're working with other developers, or you're reading your old code and you come and you see this, like you see something like this, you're like, oh man, what am I gonna do with all this? Right? Cool. Well, we're gonna get rid of macro expansion and we're just gonna run our code. So we got 4 lines of text here. We should see 4 lines of text here. Perfect. Right? So there's nothing special about this first line, other than it's going to run in order of what we've written it. We need to have these. If we don't have these, the Rust compiler is going to have a problem with that. It's not going to let us continue. This is a big thing of the Rust compiler, is it won't let us continue if there's issues. It's going to stop us. It's going to say, hey, you wrote this this macro, but there's no end of this line. I don't understand where it stops. Is there something I'm missing here? Now, the other thing that's really cool about Rust is that this won't always be the case, but sometimes it can tell you what's wrong with your code. See, it's saying, hey, I think you should put a colon here. And it says unexpected token. What does that mean? Right? What that's saying is, like, look, this line ended, there's no semicolon, and the next thing I see is another print line macro. That it doesn't work that way. That's what it's telling me. It's unexpected token. We won't get into why it calls it a token. That's another diversion we don't need right now. But it's saying, I think you should add. It looks like, from me, the compiler is looking at your code and saying, I think you should put a semicolon here. I think that's what you meant to do. And so we say, thank you, Rust compiler. Thank you for your help. thank you for solving my problems. I hope you can solve more of my problems, right? We put the semicolon in and we run. And what happens? Well, it should work, right? Yeah, it works. It just works. Any questions in the chat so far, guys? You've been really quiet. I'm hoping that means you're coding along and trying stuff out. If there's no questions, that's fine. We can continue on. All right, let's go check back in with the book, see where we're at. Unless some questions pop up. Give me just a moment to switch windows. Yes. Okay. So, all right, we're back up. So, if you wrote this program, any version of this program, congratulations. You're a Rust developer. You're a Rust programmer now, right? You've written a Rust program. You can go tell your friends you're a Rust programmer. Now, you may not be able to go get a job as a Rust programmer yet. Maybe you can. I don't know. But you've written one, and I think you can call yourself. I'm not an authority, but I think you can call yourself a Rust programmer, and I think you should. So, this goes into some more, basically a lot of the material that we talked about. Rust font or Rust format. I won't get into right now. We'll have opportunity to see that later. Yeah, so this is a good section right here. So we didn't experience this part because adding it to great perfect Rust programmer. We didn't put this. We didn't go through this step, right? Because we just used our playground. But if you were running this from the command line, you would go through this step, okay? So let me just review kind of the through line that has been going on in the book, right? It's a little bit different than what we did, and that's okay. We created this file, right? Where you go? Sorry. We created the file main.rs in these directories. And then, so here's some commands here that we didn't run. Well, actually we did. We did run these commands. We just didn't type them. We use the buttons on the playground. But when we click that run button, all we're doing really is actually two steps, and that's what they're talking about in that section that we're going to skip up to in just a moment. We're running Rust C and main.rs, which is the name of the file we created that has our code in it. And what is that doing? That's compiling our code into an executable application. And then in the Linux / Mac OS world, you would type this command to run that application. This is the name of your application, main. Okay. Similar in Windows. I grew up on Windows. I haven't used it as much lately, but I do know a .exe file when I see one. It's an executable file. They've been that way since it was in DOS. That's how old I am. I used to love DOS. That's still my favorite operating system. Maybe, I don't know. I remembered it, and I didn't like Windows when it came around. If you want some personal history on me, so anyway, rant over. But yeah, so just important to note here. There's two steps. There's Rust C, which stands for the C stands for compiler, Rust compiler, main.rs. We're telling the Rust compiler, here's our file, it has our code in it. And remember when we were seeing all that information, like remember when I took the semicolon off and it said, hey, you should put a semicolon here. That was the Rust compiler telling us that. It would not move. It actually wouldn't create this second executable file. Here for Windows, here for Linux. It would not create that file unless we fix that bug. So we're kind of stuck here, right? Like if we have a bug that the Rust compiler doesn't like, we're not going to get this executable file out to work with. Okay, so let's talk about this two-part process. Compiling and running are separate steps. Give me just a moment here. I'm going to clear my throat again. Okay, so when we click that run button, it was actually doing two things for us. It was compiling the program. And remember, we kind of talked about what the compiler does, right? It looks at our text file called main.rs, and and the first line of our program, it was that, remember, it was that fn. We can scroll up and see it, right? It was this fn main. The compiler's just looking at this, right? And then it's putting it together into a binary executable. You can see that here. And that binary executable is in the Linux/Mac OS world is this main, and in the Windows world, it's just main.exe. So when we click run, it compiles the code, it outputs this executable file, and it runs that file when we're clicking run on the playground. If you're working with Rust C, this command line application, Rust compiler, is also an application, FYI. If you're working on the command line, Rust C, we're saying run the Rust compiler on main.rs. That's all we're doing. And so it creates that executable and then it runs it. That's what's happening. That's all that's happening. That's all the magic behind that button on the Rust playground. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the idea, right? All right. Yeah, so here's some important notes. Right? You have your main.rs. This is an important concept if you don't understand it yet. Your main.rs file is the file where your code lives, the code that you write, your Rust code. That's where that lives. Compiler doesn't change that, right? It takes that file, that text file, and it generates another file. If you're on a Windows, the file it generates is main.exe. If you're on a Linux or Mac OS environment, it's going to create a file called main. That's it. But your main.rs remains the same. So here's an important note that kind of, sorry, I was just reading over this real quick. Yeah, okay, so this is an important note. So I know some people may be coming here with some experience with like Python or JavaScript. You may not be used to this idea of compiling and running a program, right? It's usually just one step. But in Rust, we're getting down to some of the bare metal stuff, right? Not quite bare metal, but we're getting down to low level. We need to understand that the Rust compiler is doing its work, because that's gonna become important as we continue to write Rust programs. And if we want to go into Solana development, the compilation process is a little different than what you're doing right now. That's a preview way down the road. All right. So next up, we're going to use what's called Cargo, the Cargo tool, which is another awesome part of Rust that will make this process of compiling and running easier. Right? For the time being, like what we just did, that wasn't terribly painful. Right? If we're working on our excuse me, I'm doing two things at once right now. I'm going to bring up a terminal, a separate terminal, and give me just a moment to switch that over to that, so we can see Cargo. So we did a two-step process, right? Like on the Rust playground, it was very easy, but on the on the command line, it was two steps. It was the compilation, and then it was the running the file. Now that's not even that big a deal, right? That's not hard. But the whole like running, like compiling and running, it starts to get really complicated as your programs get more complex. So we're going to start learning a little bit about cargo. It's going to be kind of a preview for the next session, just to kind of whet your palate. Yeah. Let me just run this real quick here. All right. So let me. So we got a few programs in here you can see I've been messing around with. But so let's just do this real quick. We're going to walk through that process really quickly again, what we've done in the past. Make dir. Let's do hello unbear. Right? Oh, excuse me. I hope that wasn't too loud. And then we're going to, I'm working through steps real quick. We've already seen them right in the book. We're going to just do this stuff really manually. Working from the command line. Please don't be intimidated by this. It looks a little intimidating maybe, but don't worry about it. Just kind of like, stick with me. So we've created this main.rs file. Now I'm going to edit the file. We're going to see everything that we've seen before. Right? That's pretty simple. We remember that, right? Okay. So we have in this hello untitled bear directory, we have this main.rs file. Okay. Remember our steps: rustc main.rs. This is going to compile the code. It'll tell us if there's any errors. There shouldn't be. There wasn't, so we didn't get any output. But now if we write ls, what do we see? We see main and main.rs, right? That's our code. This is our executable like we talked about. Now we just need to run this executable file. Hello untitled bear. It worked. Great. Everything works. Okay. That's the manual way, right? Let's go back a level, and we're going to use cargo to create a new application. Let's do Master Dogan. I hope I'm not sure you're still with us, but you're gonna have a hello world name after you. Oops. All right. So we have a little more information here, right? Let's go into that directory. Oh, we got some more things here, right? We have this cargo.toml file. We're gonna learn what that is in the next section. We have the source folder. Let's go into that. src, short for source. ls, we got a main.rs, right? Okay. So this has all been created for us. Let me just clear screen. Nothing changed, just cleared the screen till we got back to the top. And then we're going to edit our main just to take a look at it, right? Same thing. This is actually boilerplate code. I didn't write this. The Rust tool Cargo wrote this for us. Okay, we're just changing this so we can have something different going on. Now, we're gonna use cargo, okay? Instead of like doing this rusty main, like we could do that, right? But we don't want to. I'm kind of lazy. We're gonna go back a level. We're gonna go up to the root directory. We have our cargo.toml file here. You don't know what that means yet. It's okay. We'll look at it. And we're gonna do cargo run. This is it. That's all we're typing. Let's see what happens. It's compiling. Okay. All right. So this is cargo. Instead of us having to write rustc space main.rs and then run our main file, our main executable file, I just typed in cargo run. And so cargo is this application that comes with Rust that takes care of these steps for you. Now, again, this doesn't seem like a big deal, right? like writing rustc space main.rs and then dot /main, not a big deal. But as we get more involved in our programs, as we add things called dependencies. What are dependencies? That's just other code from other places. It's going to help us build things. We want to build on the Solana blockchain. We're going to use some Solana libraries. We may use a framework like Anchor. We need to bring all that stuff in. Now, if we're doing that manually, that becomes a big pain in the butt, and we don't want to mess with that. So mostly from here on out, we're going to use some version of Cargo, okay? But we're going to learn about Cargo next. So we're going to shut things down here. We're going to end there. I hope you've taken the time to write your Hello World program, because that's the first step, right? Don't just watch these videos. Don't just watch the stream. Write the application. If you have not yet, join the GROM's Discord. You can find the link in the chat, or you can. Sorry, I got a question here from Untitled Bear. How did you get back to Shell after you enter main.rs? So I was in. Sorry. All right, so I was in Vim. Okay, this is a hipster code editor. We won't normally be in here. Okay, but I just needed to spin this up quick. I call it a hipster code editor. So to get out of Vim, which is a kind of pain in the butt, using Git. I saw Vim. Okay. Oh yeah. So I wouldn't recommend using Vim. It's just another thing you need to learn. That there's other more important things to learn. But if you happen to go into Vim, because this happens sometimes, we get stuck in Vim. You're just going to type in colon, and then Q. Now, this is where it already starts to get tricky. Okay, so Q will get me out. Okay, but if I do something here, sorry. Let's do this just to change it. We're doing a quick Vim lesson. I can't believe we're already in Vim. All right. If I go to quit after changing this, I'm going to have an issue. And what that's saying is that I've changed this text file, and it won't let me quit until I've saved this. All right. So to save, you do :W. Okay, that saves it. To quit, you do :Q. If you want to save and quit, :WQ. If you don't want to save and want to quit, like maybe you change something, you don't want to save it. When I was first using Vim, that was usually the case. I got in here and I messed something up and I don't know what I did. I just want to quit without saving it. Do a quit ! And that'll quit. All right. That's your Vim tip. So what I was saying, we're going to wrap things up here. This is the beginning of a journey for you. I hope you take it seriously. I hope you focus and spend time with it. Don't wait on me. Go out and learn on your own. Start writing your Rust programs. Join the GROM's Discord. Tell me what you're working on. I want to hear it. Help others. Other people will help you. And if you want to become a Solana developer, this is also a first step of a long journey. Stay focused. It's gonna feel tough and maybe even impossible at times, but you can do it as long as you stay focused. All right. Thanks everyone for coming out. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on Twitch, please follow us. And more importantly, join the GROM's Discord. The link should be on the Twitch channel, the YouTube channel. Untitled Bear, good work today. We will talk soon. Thanks, y'all.